You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. I'm Doc Martin. You're on Maximum Medicine. And you know, for years now, I've been talking about alternative healing and shamanic energies, and the shaman being sort of an intermediary between the human world and the spirit world. But what keeps coming up over and over that is sort of one of my bees in my bonnet is we need mainstream medicine to bring in the gifts of these alternative ways of healing. The ancient medicine men and women didn't have x-rays, they didn't have prescription pads, and they were able to see and heal in ways that we don't use anymore. Well, with me tonight is a girl after my own heart, Wendie Colter. She's the founder of The Practical Path. I'll let her tell you about that in a minute. She is a medical intuitive, and she teaches, especially in those hallowed halls of mainstream medicine. She teaches mainstream practitioners how to boost their own intuition. And you know, Wendie, I want you to tell people about how you came to this, but I just wanted to say one thing. It struck me that in medical school, we had a sort of a curriculum that ran through the 4 years that was considered very edgy. And nowadays I'd kind of be like, roll my eyes, but we would hear about sort of the art of medicine. And they love to say the art of medicine when they can't just plain say, you know, this sounds like woo-woo stuff, but you know, something else is going on. But they had a study, and I don't have the details, that a physician could walk in the room, and it was physicians back then, we didn't have mid-levels, could walk in the room and they could know to an 85% degree that the person was gonna go downhill, get better, or stay the same. Kind of a no-brainer to me. So tell us, if you would please, you're a medical intuitive. What does that mean? And how did you grow up with that? Did you teach yourself that? Tell us a little bit.
Well, you know, I love the introduction, Doc Martin, because you're right on, as you know, about what's going on out there in the medical world, that, you know, doctors don't want to talk about it, but they recognize intuition in their own work. Nurses do too. And so it's an interesting phenomenon where we're at, you know, right, this sort of juxtaposition between an understanding of this and not wanting to talk about it at all because there's no way to empirically test it, or so they say. So in my world, I don't come from the medical world at all. I come from a different world entirely, but always was very, very intuitive as I grew up. And as a child, I could kind of tell if somebody wasn't feeling well just by, I don't know, perceiving their energy, I suppose I was doing. And as I grew up, I realized that I had this sort of intuitive perception that maybe other people didn't have, which surprised me. I thought everybody could do that, really. But later in life, I became an energy healer and noticed that as I was doing my energy healing work, I could literally see into the physical body and the physiology of my clients. And I could also see what was keeping an issue in place, even when they wanted to release it. Even when I used my energy healing, sometimes it would let go and sometimes it wouldn't. So what was happening there? I was very curious to know. And I found that when I spent some time querying their bodies and their energy field for the reasons, the underlying causes as to why something wouldn't shift or move or heal as readily as they might have wanted, I got tons of information, just loads of information. And I found myself imparting that to the client before I would even do an energy healing, because that information helped them release even more stuff. When I was doing my energy healing, there just stuff was letting go like crazy, and they were having much deeper healing experiences. And so this got sort of transmitted on some occasions to their doctors. And then I was getting phone calls from doctors saying, would you look at this patient? And can you help me with this? And challenging cases, and things like that. And I thought, well, there's something here. What is this?
So before you go on,
Mhm.
when you say things release, can you give me more of an example? And then, second to that, do you think your intention was present that kind of nudged it along and booted it along? Do you think it was you and the client together in the intention for healing? Or what made it fly off?
You
Um,
know, it's such a good question. I call this in my book, I call it, and in my programs, permission level. Permission for wellness is what I call it in the book, meaning how much permission does energetic permission, not conscious permission. Everybody wants to heal. We all want to heal, right? When something's going wrong. And our bodies want to heal too. But there's a combination of physical and energetic permission that has to raise in order for the body to follow that, right? So that's kind of a more esoteric way to say it. But what I did notice was when people could hear what their bodies wanted them to know, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, what their spirit wanted them to hear, right? In all these ways, they began healing. So it was like
so
missing pieces of information is how I see it.
I have two things in here that sort of are corollaries. One of my all-time favorite, my hero in in the ancient ways of healing, and I never met the man, was Frank Fool's Crow, a Lakota Sioux
Mm.
medicine man, very powerful healer. Several books written by his biographer, who was a Lutheran minister who was blown away. And Frank would have his clients come to his teepee. We're talking on the reservation, Pine Ridge Reservation. And they would come and they would stay with him for 4 days. And when the biographer said, Frank, tell me about this, they come, what's the magic of 4 days? And I'm paraphrasing here. And Frank said, spirit doesn't take 4 days, spirit is instantaneous. But the client needs the 4 days. And here, that's what I'm thinking is this is another way of saying we've got to, and we'll use new age buzzwords here, raise the vibration enough to hit the permission point.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And what's really funny is that I have another quote that I love. I kind of live by it, and I think medical intuition lives by it. And that is by Dr. Dean Ornish. And the quote is, excuse me. Oh, now I'm going to forget it. Awareness. Thank you. Awareness is the first step in healing. What a great concept. It's the same idea. Awareness is what raises permission, what allows for healing. People can heal of a physical issue, but never be healed of the emotional, spiritual, mental, energetic pieces of it. And people can heal from an energetic crisis and still their bodies can be reactive. So, like if I had $1 for every client that said, I worked that out in therapy 10 years ago or 20 years ago, well, it's still in your energy. So that means
Right.
something's not complete. So this is what, as a medical intuitive, what I look for. And this is what I train my students to look for in the process of doing this work. And that information is just powerful stuff. We're not made of we're made of our entire life experience. What did Carolyn May say? Your biography is your biology. Beautifully put. And there's research around that. Early life trauma leading to later life health imbalance is well documented. the field of psychoneuroimmunology, which is all about how our emotions affect our immune system and our neurology. It's all there. And as a
Right.
medical intuitive, my job is to look at that, look for that, and impart that information to the client so they have a path forward to health. And it's never discussed in conventional medicine, as well you know.
Right. So it's interesting. I mean, aware is such a, um, in AA, the first step of a problem is your awareness.
There
But
it
when
is.
I intuited a medicine wheel in my book, Maximize Your Healing Power, that just came out, I intuited a process. And it's called the 4 A's, and the first step is aware.
Mhm.
And it's energetically, and that's also the first step is your intuition about the issue.
Yeah,
So that all fits. I love that.
it's great.
The other thought I had, I've met two people recently. Professor Irvin Laszlo, who is very big Akashic field consciousness, quantum relationship, and the information field, and one of his colleagues from Hungary, Dr. Maria Sagi, who heals in the information field. Now, what she does is in altered state, and she practices a combination of energy medicine, as I can see it, homeopathy, and a new homeopathy. She taps into the information field. And maybe what I want you to do is say this in your words, as you know it from your experience, and finds the template, the original template that our bodies were designed to be, and asks, begs, I don't know the steps exactly, I haven't taken her training, for the tissues, the cells, the organs to return to that.
Yeah, it's
Does
beautiful.
that make sense to you?
Yes, that's a healing process. That's actually affecting a healing. I am aware of that kind of training, and I do teach a component of that in one of my master classes, which is about Akashic records and getting the blueprint and using it in a healing way. And I think for healing that is brilliant and makes a lot of sense. The bodies tend to like that sort of thing, but they also like it when we do that just with our own minds. They love visualization. There's been so many studies on how you can think and heal. I did that for myself. One of my original experiences in this whole area of mind body practice was when my body created a little benign tumor in my late 20s, early 30s, and I healed it using my mind after I read Dr. Deepak Chopra's book, Quantum Healing. He talks about that, and that comes from Carl Simonton's work in the 70s. It's like, well, how does visualization work? Well, guess what? It does. And so there's
And I just
lots. Yeah.
remember, you remember way back, what was a while ago, Candace Pert's
Yes. Molecules.
Molecules of Emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're doing this, let's just keep on this thread for a minute. When the body tells you what it wants, is there an organizing principle in our bodies that is eager to return to normalcy?
That's such a great question. I would say yes, bodies want to heal, and it takes a lot for them to not want to heal or to not have the wherewithal to heal. That ends up being kind of the issue. Cells always want to live. Life wants to live, so it wants to regenerate. And the wonderful thing about bodies is they do regenerate, they do heal, and they have the opportunity. It's just that when um, that's not really the question you asked me, though.
Is there an organizing principle? In
An
other words, when
organizing
they want
principle.
to heal, they have the information encoded to run correctly.
Well, sometimes there are genetic hitches, and we're born with a set of genes that may not conform to the idea. It's really a great question you're asking me because I don't mean to be wishy-washy about it. I think healing is hardwired, just like I think intuition is hardwired. However, Can we grow limbs, an extra limb if something happens? I don't know. I don't think that's ever been tested. Theoretically, sure.
Mhm.
Lizards do. Why not humans? But is there, is I don't know, is there enough permission going on for that to happen? I was able to shrink a tumor by half just by using visualization. So as far as I'm concerned, what's off limits? I don't know. But
Mhm.
there are things that can hinder that from happening as smoothly or easily as we would hope it would. And that has to do with a million things: what the body is trying to say, what the body wants to tell us, what the genetics want to tell us, what the mind, what's limiting the mind, and that could be belief systems or old programming. What about life history? What happened in the past that created a little train that sort of kept going, right? And someone's energy about what they believe or how they think or what they think is possible. So, really, I don't have an answer for your phenomenal question because I don't know. I can tell you that I have set up, in terms of organization, I've set up an organized step-by-step method of inquiry to see if those questions can be answered, and they can be always individually, person by person, based on what's going on for them, based on their life history, based on karma, based on past lives, based on a million things.
And that's something you said about, you had a little runaway train. I studied Peruvian shamanism with Alberto Violdo, and one of the things that stunned me, I'll just tell the personal story. We were in the section of the class where the energetics were to remove fixed imprints. And he told us things happened in your past lives, they affected your energy field, it's still there. I had a pain worse when I was anxious in my left mid lower belly. I had it forever I could remember. And so I'm working with a classmate, and I've never worked with her in class before. I don't really even know her. And she starts tracking and she starts finding something in that spot,
Hmm.
I never told her about it. And as she's finding it, she said, I think it's metal. I think it has a handle. I start drawing a picture as I'm sitting there in my journal, and it's a dagger. And I just draw the picture. So she works on taking it out, describes it to me. I show her my picture. She's like, oh, that's exactly it.
Hmm.
That pain went away and has never come back.
Congratulations. That's beautiful.
And then I'm thinking, I'm definitely was a scientist before I started studying this. I'm like, okay. But then in fast forward to a past life regression that I had with a woman several years later, and she talked about seeing me on the battlefield and being attacked. I was on horseback, being attacked by somebody below, stabbed and killed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Described the dagger, described the place on my body. So when people say, now I don't know if in time and space there really are past lives. I don't know the answer to that. In the quantum, is everything happening all at once? Probably, I don't know. But to have these confirmations for people I had never met before, I couldn't I couldn't disbelieve.
Yeah. No,
So
that's beautiful.
mhm,
Yeah. I've seen that too, and I do look at past lives when that's appropriate. I look to see how these physical traumas have carried forward. That's always fascinating to look at. Um, I will say this though, no matter what, the premise of medical intuition, and this probably is the premise of many other fields in this biofield area, and that is that the body holds on to, it stores
mhm,
all kinds of information based on emotional, mental, physical, spiritual trauma. It holds it. And not just from childhood, but certainly from past lives. Why not? Why wouldn't it?
Mhm.
And that information needs to be brought forward in order for healing to take place. It needs to be heard. It needs to be made aware. Healing of some kind, to put that into the mix. Listen, from my perspective, it's going to sound really odd, but from my perspective, I don't see any difference between energetic healing s- and conventional healing. Right?
Mhm.
To me, it's like if the surgery or the pharmaceutical is going to implement the healing the body is asking for, or if the energy process or the herbs are going to implement the healing the body is asking for, to me, the same. It's the
Mhm.
same thing because the body's asking for it. Now, what we can get into in healthcare the way it is now is it's completely split, right? You have conventional medicine, and then you have alternative practices or integrative that are trying to meld the two, but it's still very split.
It
And
is.
what most of my clients come to me and they say is, I don't know which way to turn. All the tests in conventional medicine show I'm fine. I know I'm not fine, right? And so
Right.
I've gone to 3 naturopaths, or I've seen 5 energy healers, or I've gone to 2, acupuncturists. What's going to work for me? And my job is to query the body, ask the body, what's going to work here? What could work here? And when that information is brought forward, it can kind of clear away some of the fog, right? And let's get right to it as best we can and take the next step and the next step and the next step. So that is why I love your story, by the way. Thank you for that. The dagger, and so appropriate. Um, the the point here is that until we look and see, we don't know, right? You had this pain that was related to a past life. It was probably brought forward in this life and exacerbated in some way by life experience or by a holding on to it for some reason. Why? Wouldn't that be an interesting question to ask? Why did your body hang on to this? What's the message in there? Right?
And the thing also that I think is key, and we'll just finish up with this and then we'll take a short break because there's so many good things to talk about. The person's beliefs.
Hmm.
Because when you said you've got to reach a level of permission, there are people who believe at some core level that they either deserve this thing, and my favorite one is back pain being a burden, an extra duty to carry, being weighed down. They either believe that they somehow deserve it, or they believe that it can't be gotten rid of. It's sort of there's a contract to hold on to that.
Hmm.
And that's the part that sometimes is frustrating because when the times, and I'm not nearly as intuitive as you are, although as you teach with my shamanic training, I got more intuitive, but to see clearly the step that needs to happen and seeing this wall, or
Hmm.
I would say the absence of permission, or even plant your flag on the hill. I ain't giving you permission. That sometimes is very frustrating, isn't it?
It is. That's where that informational awareness comes in, because these kinds of inculcations, you could say, belief systems, things that come from the outside. Children are constantly bombarded by other
Oh,
people's beliefs, and they have to take it on in order to really just get through and become,
mhm.
grow and live. And some of these are great belief systems, but a lot of them are highly limiting, and they limit the free will and spirit of people. But that's not to say belief systems aren't valuable. It's just what kind we're talking about. We also make these internal belief systems that really just come from ourselves based on life and the traumas of life. And there's a lot, this goes very, very subtle. It can be very subtle too. Because we think of trauma as this big major thing. Well, what about these tiny little traumas that happen every day and solidify these beliefs? And then they're there and they run in the background. We're not even aware of them. So becoming aware of them can really shift everything.
Well, I want to just share one quick little personal anecdote and then we're going to take a break. At one time, I remember reflecting on my absolute shudder at the idea of being pregnant. I mean, just you know. And I remember that as I looked back on my childhood, and this was in therapy years ago, every time my mom got pregnant, my dad was distant, an adulterer,
Yeah.
you know, all of these things. And I'm like, I am never being, what I wanted to say is, I will never allow myself to be disrespected. But what it probably set up in me is, I will never be pregnant and I don't have children. So we do take on those beliefs that are, have the right intention. We don't want to be in that place where we're put down, but the outcome maybe it gets carried away.
Yes, and that's a really great insight. It's a really important insight for you and for anyone. Some of these belief systems are so buried, you could say, so
Mhm.
deep in the subconscious that for when the medical intuitive, when I can look at it and bring it forward, it just rings bells all over the place. They didn't even know that was there. And
Mhm.
that's when it gets really exciting because that's the really deep buried stuff that medical intuitives are ideal for finding.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be back with Wendie Colter. We'll see you in a minute. Hi, everybody. We're back. I'm Doc Martin on Maximum Medicine. I have Wendie Colter with me. She is a brilliant medical intuitive, and I want her to tell you how you guys can learn more from her. And then we're going to talk about what she does best, and that is see in ways it's hard to believe. Wendie, how do people reach you, learn from you? Tell
Thank,
us.
thank you. So the website is thepracticalpath.com. Just like it sounds, 3 words all in a row, thepracticalpath.com. There are a number of ways that people can find out more about the main program, which is a 1-year program for wellness professionals. I also have, and that's a level 1 and a level 2. I also have a workshop or program for everyone called Medical Intuition for Healing and Self-Care. And that was put together so anyone can learn how to access their own medical intuitive inside, right? To learn how to create that connection between their mind and their body and actually do some medical intuitive skills and learn how to do that for themselves. So that's coming up soon, and you can get on the wait list for that, or it may be available when you go to the website. I also have my book, Essentials of Medical Intuition, A Visionary Path to Wellness, which I'm proud to say just won 2 awards, the Nautilus Award and the International Book Award, thrilling. And that's on Amazon. There's also information on the website. And for anyone who just wants to kind of stick their toe in the water, there are guided meditations on the website, which I call Energy Essentials. And these are ways to work with your own energy field and start to enhance your intuitive ability so that you can start managing your own energy field and your own energy. So please do take advantage of all of that. You can reach out by phone or by email to us as well.
And do you still do personal sessions?
I do. I do. I'm a little booked out, but go to the website in terms of you might have to wait a month or 2 before you get an appointment these days, but please do go there anyway and get yourself signed up for a session. It's a private session with me. We also have our graduates who are available as well, and you can book sessions with them too, not through the website, but through our blog, and you'll see information about them.
Wonderful. Thank you. So you go into centers of mainstream medicine that I'll have to say sometimes to me felt pretty stodgy, pretty rigid. And you're going in there and you are teaching medical professionals, healthcare providers about ways to literally amplify and work on what we used to call this sort of catch-all phrase, the art of medicine.
Yeah.
So in your experience and then now in your teaching, how do people, how are they intuitive? What sorts of information are they linking up to? What types of,
It's a
like
good
for me, I see pictures. And if I want something to happen, I'm making a movie in my head.
yes.
So tell me what people sense.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate that. And I'll just say for a moment, I'm incredibly honored to be an educational contributor for the the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, which is a really wonderful organization. And I have spoken at functional and integrative healthcare conferences for years now, and taught at some of the main integrative healthcare uh, organizations in the country. It's been quite an honor, which just tells me that medical intuition is something that isn't foreign to healthcare professionals. They kind of get it, even though no one's ever presented it in more of a sort of a structured way. So that's thing one I wanted to piggyback on.
They're hungry for it,
They are.
but they're afraid to say so because it doesn't have a randomized controlled study that they can quote in the New England Journal and blah, 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 blah. But they are hungry for it.
Well, I want to get to your question, but let me just say to the listeners here and to you that you're correct. There has been very, very little study on medical intuition over the years. There have been some since I want to say the 70s, but really very inconclusive. And when I looked at that, and knowing how my students are hitting their marks continually, we're getting great feedback all the time. I thought, there's got to be some new research done. So I created a study that was
Oh,
published in the Journal of Integrative and Complementary Medicine in 2020. The study was done in 2019, where we had five of my graduates and 67 uh, community participants, some of whom were patients at UCSD Medical Center that wanted to participate with us. And we basically did as close to it wasn't a randomized control trial because we didn't have access to medical records. But what we did was we queried, we gave our sessions and then we queried them. They did an anonymous survey, the participants, and we came out with 94% accuracy on the medical intuitive's ability to locate and evaluate their primary health issue. No health intake, nothing like that. Cold reads, you would say, right? Eyes closed with the medical intuitives. All we had was their name, and that's it. So 94% was pretty impressive. We also had 98% accuracy in describing life history that could correlate to their health issue. Another piece of result we came out with was a 94% consistency with their known medical diagnosis. Those of the participants who had a diagnosis was a little bit about half of them. And of that half, 94% said you nailed it. And so that was basically an exploratory study to find out what the potential efficacy of medical intuition could be. And those numbers were through the
they're
roof.
wild.
Yeah,
Mhm.
through the roof. And so that has now led us to a new study coming forward. Uh, I can't talk too much about it because it hasn't quite yet, gotten green lit, but it will be with doctors who have the medical records, their patients, and a medical intuitive. And we want to create a new model for healthcare that includes medical intuitives involved in the process, which is
Mhm.
just phenomenal. And
Yes,
we're
that's
very excited
wonderful.
about that. Yeah.
I want to throw something in here that I'm sure the listeners have heard of, and I'm sure you have. Um, Dr. Hen Liu, Hawaiian psychiatrist, also Hawaiian shaman, sat in I believe it was a state psychiatric facility of really bad, we're talking bad pathologies, even probably criminal pathologies, sat with their medical records, never went to meet the person, and meditated and intuited or whatever he did shamanically. And he had a huge percentage of these patients heal and leave the hospital.
That's beautiful.
So, those kinds of things can happen. I love that.
I love that too. Um, the way I practice, you asked me how I practice, so I'll jump into
Yeah,
that. And
yeah,
I appreciate the
good.
question. How I practice is probably more along the lines of the leaders in the field like Edgar Casey, who did assessments, right? And Carolyn Mace, who did assessments. They weren't necessarily doing healings the way you described with the shaman, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. It's just a different kind of modality. What I'm doing is, and teaching is, an eyes closed process of visual intuition. So it's very similar to that idea of movies in the mind.
Mhm.
And when I look at the body, the only correlation I can have in real life is an MRI, but
Mhm.
it's in color and it's much even more detailed than an MRI, if you can believe that. It's because I can see down to the cellular level, what's going on in the actual cell, and how it moves and how it's functioning, the whole physiology of it. So it's an even more detailed picture than you could get when in any imaging I'm aware of right now, in the medical world. That's how I see the physical body. So I need to know my anatomy, right? I need to know what the liver is supposed to do and what a healthy kidney looks like and what the function of a lung is supposed to be. But that's all I really need to know. I don't have 4 years of anatomy training. I just need to know what I'm looking at so that I can tell. However, there's also this other piece of it, which you can call the quantum field. Call it what you will.
Mhm.
Call it spirit. I don't care. But what it is a connection to this sort of broader plane of knowledge that really contains all knowledge, right? So whatever's current and possibly
Casey's Akashic Field.
you can call it the Akashic field. Casey did call it that. And there are plenty of other words. Quantum field is what, a
Right.
lot of the scientists call
Mhm.
it now. Well, what does that mean? That means that as a medical intuitive, I have case study after case study, time after time, where my connection to that field, so to speak, and my client's information can bring an answer that I would have absolutely no concept of, no idea, no prior knowledge at all. Over and over and over, medical intuitives talk about this. The case studies reflect it. The fact that 94 to 98% accuracy rates are given when there's no prior knowledge at all. What does that mean? That means we're tapping into something that
Right.
has deep, profound, and accurate information. That's the skill, right? Put it in, you want to nutshell it? There it is.
And I was thinking, and I want you to talk a little bit more about this. I see things when I'm intuitive. I don't actually, um, sometimes I actually see a picture, but mostly I'll get an image flash across the back of my eyes, or I'll get a knowing, and it's always on the left side of my head. Um, and I was thinking that you learned what normal organs were, but I'm sure that you get a knowing that there is something abnormal, even if you didn't know already what was normal.
You're talking about when I'm looking at a liver or
Organ
something?
system, right? Because
Sure, of course.
sometimes I'll get this, and I've learned to train myself when I get these, I call them downloads or
Yeah,
hits, or
hits. Yeah.
um, I train myself not to shrug it off because it's so weird in my rational human brain. And I'll just say it out loud. And, 999 times out of 1,000, the person will go, oh, I can't, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so, anyway, I do think, and I think we have to, at the very least, suspend disbelief.
Well, you can imagine teaching left-brained MDs and nurses, researchers and whatnot over the last 15 years that, yeah, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief going on. That's actually the learning curve. But I'll tell you what, um, the actually, I want to address something you said.
Yeah, yeah.
Your conversation is making me think all these wonderful things too. So, like, how do you get it out? The um, the hits thing. Every energy practitioner, anybody who's intuitive at all, understands hits. We do. We get it. It's hardwired into us as humans. We're
Mhm.
all intuitive. It's ridiculous to think we're not. So we will always get, even the most skeptical person will have some kind of, call it coincidence, call it serendipity, call it whatever you will. It's a connection, right? So medical intuition, the way I practice it, isn't hit based. It's actually a complete process from beginning to end that is within that intuitive state. So it's not like random, it's not random.
Right,
And
right,
sometimes these hits can be, they just come when they come and you can't call them in or whatever. But this process is very much, step by step by step. So we're going to look at all of it. It's not going to be random. It's going to be very methodical. That's how I teach the left brain folks, because it's a structure. And that structure, they can get their left brains around. The practice of it means getting into that intuitive state and stating things in a certain order. And that's what gives the information to the client. So that's might be a little, I know it's different than these beautiful intuitive hits. I call them flashes of insight. It's just like, boom, there it is. Well, I didn't ask for that. How do I get that back? Well,
right,
this is the process in which we do it.
right.
So yeah, and for what I teach is visual intuition. The clair, you've heard of the clairs. The clair is clairvoyance, and I can tell you that word is loaded. That room will clear a, that word will clear a room of doctors faster than anything else I could ever say, right? It's clairvoyance. They all run for the door because it's a stigmatized word. Uh,
Yeah,
what you were talking about, that download feeling, and that's part of your brain, that's claircognizance, clear knowing, right? Clairvoyance just means clear seeing. Voyance is a French word to see. And there's a whole bunch of other wonderful clairs. Clear feeling, clairsentience is what most nurses who've come to the training have, and many, many people do, where they feel the emotions of their client or patient or their friends or family, right? And they don't have a boundary in terms of whose emotion is it, whose feeling is it, right? Is it mine or somebody else's? They're porous in many ways. So I teach clairvoyance as a skill set for this practice of medical intuition because I want to see what's going on. And I also want to keep my energy as, I would say, clean as possible. Right.
mhm,
Plenty of boundary, no, nothing, affecting my body because I don't want to be affected by somebody else's health issue. I want to be able to look at it and explain it and
mhm,
things along those lines. So that's the skill. And it is very much like you said, in the mind's eye.
mhm. So one of the things you said, and I think it was about your study, and um, is this as if they were blindfolded. And sometimes um what's helped me along the way is I do better sometimes if I don't see the person.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because as soon as I see, and I've got my mainstream doctor brain on, I'm looking and I'm judging based on color, tired looking, saggy affect, But when I hear that, and if I do energy sessions and I hear their voice, and one of the things and I'll extend this, you said about, being very empathic or resonating. We're meant as humans to resonate with others.
sure.
But and when we do that as healers, you have to resonate, and as physicians, you have to resonate enough to really feel, to get what they're telling you. I mean, to me, I have to. But for me, one of the big triggers is when I get this, it's not quite icky feeling, but it's a something's not right, because what I'm being presented in the visual and they're telling me and what I'm feeling are so discordant,
Hmm.
so incongruent, that I'm going, something else really big is going on here.
Yeah.
Because, yeah. Are those sort of red flags that you know that people pick up in their training?
Well, again, what you're talking about is the skill set of being able to visually and not feeling wise. I get a lot of clairsentience in the program, and I tell them right off the bat, you're not going to use clairsentience in this work at all. So there are a lot of mental health care people who are used to, kind of
Mhm,
melding with the, auric
mhm,
field or whatever. And I understand the need for that. I understand the value of it. In this work, it is the opposite of that. And there's a reason. It's called neutrality is the reason.
right.
And if we don't keep our energy neutral, we are in my world, literally,
We're
enmeshing in a way.
contaminated. We're
Well,
con
that's one way to say it. And a lot of people feel that way at
Mhm.
the end of a work day. They feel like exhausted. They feel like a sponge that's can't hold another drop. And how do you work your self-care around that? That's the challenge, right?
But it's more also than just taking on stuff that isn't yours. Goes the opposite way. Your filters and beliefs and limiting beliefs are now impacting your assessment. So
Exactly.
it is a really big challenge. I mean, it's a daily challenge for me is how to be completely unbiased,
Yeah,
how to,
that's the word.
and it's interesting because I often kind of grumble at my girlfriend who's very empathic about, it's going to sound really bad, not caring so much.
Well,
Step
the,
back and don't care in that way where you want to get all jiggy
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. I call it compassionate neutrality. That's what I call it.
Mhm,
Because we are empathic people. Humans just are. It's part of our nature. So are animals. This whole planet is that way. But we can get overloaded. We can get completely bombarded. It can really mess us up. And so in this program, I do teach compassionate neutrality. We want to be compassionate human beings, but we also want to be neutral in our energy. So this work doesn't turn that off. It enhances your ability to keep your own energy clean. I call it energy hygiene. We got to keep our own energy clean so that we can actually not be affected by the client or a patient or family or the world. Hello,
mhm,
the
mhm,
world's drama, because God knows it's never going to end. I mean, we have nothing but drama here. And
yeah,
what we want to do is have that level of self-care. That is the very first thing I teach because it is endemic to people who work in healthcare,
mhm,
that overloaded
mhm.
experience.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking, probably we could argue that the most compassionate human we know on this planet is the Dalai Lama.
Mm.
And he probably has open heart to every single thing, things that would even, abhor us. But he's probably got that neutrality down pat.
I would hope so. He certainly projects that. It's a lovely energy. The other
Mhm,
thing you mentioned was bias. And what I find interesting about that word is that when I've looked into it and queried people and talked to them and interviewed them, medical intuition should be the way I believe it should be practiced. And there's that should word, but there it is, in a non-biased fashion. In other words, if I come to a client with my big old body of knowledge and my biases and my filters, I'm
mhm,
not going to be able to see clearly for them. That is just, it can't. It'll just get in the way of everything. And every piece of healthcare, even the most wonderful, you know, Eastern medicine practices or Ayurvedic practices, it all comes from body of knowledge. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, inherently, when you go see your chiropractor, you want them to do chiropractic. It's like you want their body of knowledge, or your heart doctor, whatever.
mhm,
But medical intuition should be and is the way I teach it. No body of, it's like that body of knowledge comes last. What I want to ask is from that quantum field perspective, based on your physiology, your energy anatomy, your history, what is going on for you, not what I bring to it at all.
mhm.
Big difference.
It is a big difference. Yep. And I think I had two guests recently. The podcast, the episodes are going to be coming out mid-July and mid-August. Professor Irvin Laszlo, a brilliant thinker who's been thinking and pondering and genius level inspiration about the quantum field and the information that's stored. It's all the information field. And then one of his colleagues who actually heals using the information field. And so I think that there's a frontier for medicine in that knowledge. People who
Yeah.
started to bring it forward, Deepak started, um, you know, medical intuitives like Carolyn Mason, yourself have brought it forward, but that, people who teach shamanic healing, to me, they had to be tapping into the information field. I mean, they had to be energy healers. I mean, I don't know how else it could have happened. But if we could, and we only have a couple minutes left, my wish would really be for mainstream medicine to start to bring some of this in, bridge the mystical and the scientific, bridge it in, and because it gives us amplifies our power immensely, doesn't it?
You took the words out of my mouth. Absolutely. And what's really wonderful right now about this time in history is, and I couldn't say this 20 years ago, when I was starting out, you probably couldn't either, is that we've come a long way in a very short period of time in terms of this conversation. Would you agree with that? Just in terms of what you've seen?
It took me unbelievable courage
Yeah,
to even say this kind of stuff in my medical practice.
no doubt.
And
No doubt.
now people get it. I keep saying, you say it, it might sound woo woo, but they feel it. They know what you're talking about.
The clients and the patients the reason we have an understanding in the United States and probably around the world of mind-body practices, which is a wonderful little rubric, a little handle for what this is, right?
Mhm.
With meditation being taught in schools, with yoga studios on every corner, you couldn't say that 50 years ago. You couldn't even say that 20 years ago. Something is shifting that I find is so exciting. And to be a medical intuitive and not, like keeping myself under wraps, actually speaking to doctors, training doctors. This is outstanding. This is unprecedented, I would say. And what that means is that something really major is shifting, and the spiritual, so to speak, the energetic, is starting to become more studied, more accepted, people are more interested in it, and people like you who've forged the field, really, people who like myself who just I do what I do because I do it. um, we're building on the future is how I see it. And I hope 20, 50, 100 years from now, energetic practices are just as important a part of any kind of healthcare as we know they can and should be.
Yeah, I love that. So Wendie, we're going to wrap it up. Would you tell the listeners again, please, how to reach you and about the courses that you teach?
Absolutely. Thank you. The website is thepracticalpath.com. Again, thepracticalpath.com. There's information about the medical intuitive training levels 1 and 2. There's information about the self-study workshop that's coming very soon called Medical Intuition for Healing and Self-Care. That's open to everyone. And there's information about my book, Essentials of Medical Intuition, A Visionary Path to Wellness, and a lot more.
Wonderful. So everybody, this has been wonderful talking about the stuff I love and talking about the areas I know nothing about. Wendie Colter, everybody. I'm so happy you were here, Wendie. It was wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Doc Martin on Maximum Medicine. And see what I mean? This is maximum stuff here. This is the good juicy stuff. But anyway, we'll be back. We'll have a show the middle of the month. Professor Irvin Laszlo, brilliant quantum field, Akashic field, information field, right up our alley. So thank you all for being here. Good night.
You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.